Hi, this is Amazing Toyin. We're in uh, the Pick My Brain program. I'm recording this. I'm the founder of DIC Deal Finders and Magic of Real Estate. I stated in the introduction, I want this to be kind of informal. You probably have some downloads at the end of this program. Just click download, to see the rest of the paperwork. But I'm just going to talk about the unit one and model one, right? So unit one and model one consists of takeover note advantages and disadvantages. Now, so the question is this: you probably heard about no money down deal, uh, all those commercials says you could buy property with no money down, and you wonder how do they do it? I call real estate magic because it's so magical that it's the only business you could walk into with no money. You come in, you start with no money, and in a few months, depending on how good you are, depending on if you go through all these programs, right, and you graduate, so maybe this time next year or 6 months after this, you're doing the same thing that I'm teaching you right now, and you might be able to even teach your son, your daughter, because right now, I'm training my son. My daughter is about 11 years old. She goes to the site sometimes. She don't like it as much, but she does go. I make her go so she can see where the money comes from. That's it. So I'm gonna record this takeover payment. Takeover note, right? So takeover note, really, what I'm talking about is that you take over a house. Okay, you take over a house. That's really originally where the no money down comes from, right? So when I look at properties that I've taken over, usually what happens is this. The first property that I actually got, I was not the first property, when I started back again in 2001 or something or two, I put an ad in the paper that I buy properties. And so somebody called me and I asked them questions, right? And that's usually how you arrive at this. You ask them questions. So I ask her, why the most important question you could ask a seller is, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to sell your property, right? So let me draw a picture of a property right here, right? It's got a little window and it's got a door here, right? So why do you want to sell your property? And they will usually tell you, any serious seller will tell you why they want to sell their property. So I said, why do you want to sell your property? Or she said, well, we're tired of the commute. Okay, they live in Riverside and they want to move to Orange County. We're tired of the commute, and so we want out of it. So I asked them, how much do you owe on it? What's your payment? Blah, 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 right? And they gave me all that information. So I said, well, let me come and take a look at it. At that time, I didn't really discuss how I was going to buy it, but I had no money, you know. So in my mind, I was thinking, well, I could probably take over their payment, but I can't say that over the phone until I sit down with them and discuss it, right? And so when I went to see the house, I now asked them, how soon do you want to do this? They say as soon as possible. And I said, well, here's what I can do for you, right? Since you want to move as soon as possible, I can take over your payment, right? And take over payment means that I will start making your payment, right? And the paperwork and the way it's written, right, in the contract is in your paperwork that you're going to download with this thing. It's called subject to. So I say I will take over the payment subject to. Okay? And I already asked him what the payment is. So I said, I'll take how much cash do you need? And they said they need about $2,000 just to move. So I said, okay, here's what I'll do. Starting next month, I'll make your payment. You just give me the property, right? And I'll start making payments. That's how takeover note came. That's where it came from. You're taking over somebody's note, right? Because every property has a note, right? Has debt on it. Every property that has debt on it, the debt is usually a note. So you have a note and you have a deed of trust, right? In some states, it's called a mortgage. So so let me go back. Let me just move this up a little bit, right? In case I want to write some more information, right? So I hope you're finding this fun because I mean, remember when you're in class, I'm gonna move a little bit. So, when you're in class, you have your teacher is moving from one place to the other. So I didn't want this to be kind of boring, where you're just staring at some papers, right? I wanted it to be interactive with me, right? So I now wrote the contract, okay? At that time, I had this pre-printed contract, So I just pulled it out because I took it with me, and I wrote the contract. The most important thing in the contract, right? A contract, they say, has 3 elements, okay? And contract is something we're going to discuss in one of the models, right? But simply, when you write a contract, right, it must have 3 elements, right? It must have the price, right? Some kind of consideration. And this price, I think, is usually the same as meeting of mind. Consideration, time of performance, okay? And so actually, this is what I mean here. It's actually the offer, right? The offer. And then here you have the acceptance, right? That's really what constitutes a contract. But if you have one of those pre-printed, it's already in there. All these elements are there. So I wrote up the contract, okay? Then I gave them 0, nothing down. And I say, okay, I'll take over your note. Okay, I'll take over your payment. So let's draw a little house here. Okay. So this house has a note on it. The note, at that time, I think the balance on their loan was $189,000. And I think their payment was about $1,200, if I recall correctly, right? So I now wrote up my contract and I said, okay, I'll give you $2,000 down. I'll give you $2,000, right? I'll give you $2,000 down. These $2,000 will be due in 30 days. And so my thinking then was that in 30 days, I'll find somebody who will give me $2,000, I give it to them, and transfer the house to them. So immediately, they signed the contract. I put the property in the market the next day. So I now advertised. Okay, so I advertised that, hey, because at that time, I got title. Okay, because the moment I wrote this contract, I made them give me the title, right? Title means that ownership of the property. Okay, even though I haven't given them money, I promised to give them money in 30 days. They gave me title. Since I own the title, I control the title. I now put an ad in the paper that says, my ad says something like this: owner must sell. Let me write it in blue, right? So it says owner must sell. Right? Owner must sell, and I now say 10,000 down, take over my note. Okay, so they transfer the property to me, this me right here. I now take the property, transfer it to a new buyer, right? So I took over the note, and then I just transferred the note to the new buyer. The new buyer now took over the note, right? Okay, but the new buyer gave me 10K. Okay, out of my 10K, I gave $2,000 to the owner. All this happened within 30 days because I had to, hurry up. Because 30 days doesn't take that long. So I now gave the new owner, out of the $10,000 this guy brought, $2,000. Now, here's one thing. This guy didn't have $10,000. And most people, they'll be waiting until they find somebody that has $10,000. As far as I was concerned, I needed cash flow. I need to get out of there, right? So when several people called me, right, and so he's the one that had cash right away. So I said, how much money do you have? Say, I got 5,000. I can get you $10,000 in a couple of months. So I said, sure, come down. So he came in, he gave me $5,000. I transferred 2,000 to the owners. I kept $3,000. I wrote the contract. I actually gave him title. So I gave him title. So if you notice, the title was now transferred from the owner to me, right? And to the new buyer. So, cool. Hey, buyer. So let's call him John, right? You know, this is Toyin here. So the property is now transferred, right? So John now controls the property. John has title, right? And how does this title transfer? Well, the new owner has what is called a grand deed. So he gave me the grand deed, right? Gave me the grand deed. Let's use green to signify grand deed. So the owner gave me a grand deed, right? So grand deed. In some areas, in some states, it's called warranty deed, right? So the owner gave me a grand deed. I now take the grand. I now took that grand deed. I recorded it, and then I transferred it to John. Okay. Now, the note, nothing happened to the note. The note stays there, right? But in the contract I wrote there, I would take over the note subject to existing conditions. What is the existing conditions? Well, the interest rate, the length of the loan, the balance of the loan, and stuff like that. Okay, that's the existing conditions. And so I took it over, transferred it to the new owner. He now took it over just like I did based on my contract, subject to existing conditions. So it cannot, the lender cannot make him do anything else besides enforce the existing conditions, which is the balance, the note payment, and the length of the note. That's it. So that's takeover note. So, you know, earlier we were going to talk about advantages, disadvantages. Well, what's the advantage? Well, number one, the advantage is that you could buy property with no money down. Because if you notice here, let me pick up my pen. So if you guys notice, when I got this property, I had no money. I gave them a promissory note based on my contract that I will give them $2,000 in 30 days. So I had no money. That's advantage right there. Okay. What's the disadvantage? Well, the disadvantage is this. At some point, you know, in the process of several recessions, people taking over notes, not making the payments, right? Because the only person that has an advantage in this business is me. I had no money, took over their note. They're taking all the risk because see, their credit is now, their credit is subject to my ability to make payments. So if I took over their note, I couldn't rent the property and I can't sell it. They're at a disadvantage because guess what? 30 days come, I will not be able to make the payment. So they have a disadvantage. So when you take over somebody's note, the seller has a disadvantage, you have an advantage. Now, when I go to sell and I make sure instead of having a disadvantage, I try to control it to where I don't get any disadvantage, you know, and that's the subject of, you know, for another model. In other words, how do you sell? I mean, it's easy, you could buy and you give all the disadvantages to the seller. But when you are ready to sell, like right now, when I was ready to sell, so I had this disadvantage to some extent. You know why? Because this guy did not have $10,000. He had only 5,000. So he gave me the 5 grand. I gave 2 grand to the owner. So I only had 3,000, right? I have 3,000 left. But he still owes me 5,000 bucks. So what did I do? I created a new note. So I now created a note for $5,000. Let's put the note here. New note, right? Well, that's too close. I'm going to use a different pen, right? So I created a new note. For $5K. Just to protect myself, right? Original seller is still not protected because he's exposed as far as the interest is, I mean, the payment is concerned. But I trust this new guy to some extent because he gave me 5,000. I think, I'm expecting that he will make his payment because he needed a house. But you can never guarantee that. But as far as I was concerned, I want to make sure that I give the property, to somebody who can actually afford it. I made sure they have a job and they have 5,000. And that's one way for you to protect the previous owner that sold you the property. You never want to leave anybody hanging, right? So while you're protecting yourself, make sure you protect the previous owner by reselling the property to somebody who can afford it, who can make payments. I understand things happen, but when something happens, it's not because you didn't do your due diligence. It's because, like they said, as happens, right? I'm not going to say the word. So I hope you guys understand that. If you have questions, which I know you do, just write it down, email it to me, or just write it into a box. I will answer the question, and you get your answer, and then you could also bring the question to the group discussion, right? So that's really takeover node in its simplest terms, right? So hope you guys like this format, right? So we'll move on to the next model. All right, this is amazing, Toyin. See you at the next model.